being someone who's interested in the world and, interested in what it means to be alive, you ask the question, what can I
Hmm.
do every so often, don't you?
Yes.
So various points in your journey round the wheel, it's like, what should I be doing? Should I become an activist about this and that? Should I put my body there and use my skills here, or would I be more useful in service of that? And you kind of try and do the calculations of where would the best application be for maximum effect. And what I've come to, and what I come back to again and again and again, if you know who you are, then things flow from that. So, I constantly question what I'm doing, and then I come back to
Beautiful.
this through a cycle upon cycle of rumination. I'm like, yeah, just know who you are and get on with it. Most of us don't have a fucking clue who we are, and we're thrashing around like orphans in, just wandering about, trying to find some sense, trying to find some identity to cling on to, some story, some sense of purpose.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Fathers, Sons, Brothers podcasts. I'm Gareth and stoked to be sharing another courageous conversation with you today with a leader and game changer who calls himself a warrior poet. Tom Hirons is a man who believes that words, poetry, and stories have the ability to be able to change the world. I first met Tom in a Ancestral healing session where it was a space that was being created and held for men to reconnect with their ancestral line. And Tom was one of the presenters there. And he started off his delivery of his story as part of this workshop by saying, "Welcome, brothers. We are magnificent and we are broken." And it really resonated with me because I had been thinking over the last few months about a couple of different memes around the same part. One of them is, "You're perfect just the way you are, and you could use a little work." And the other one I was thinking about was this sense of like, "You're a god and you're fallible. Don't pretend that you're not both." And this for me was the idea that, yes, we are just perfect the way we are. Life has lined up exactly the way that it's needed to get us to experience our reality as we're experiencing it right now. There is perfection in that. And as men, we're born into a society which has fear, scarcity, and not enough or a lack of love built into the fabric of our society. Whether you have been born into a completely stable home or whether you've done a lot of personal slash internal work, we live in a world where our culture and the stories that we tell and the marketing slash consumer capitalist world that we've prioritized so much continually tells us that we're not enough, that you're not going to be good enough until you have this deodorant, until you use this soap, until you drive this car, until you live in this house. But even when you get there, you never feel like you quite are enough. And so recognizing that you are enough exactly as you are, and as a function of being born into this world, that we all have work to do to let go of some of those bullshit stories about not enough, not being enough personally, not having enough money, not having enough success, and really just anchoring into this place of being okay with who you are right now. So, Tom goes on to talk about a range of different topics, including how self care can support single co parenting dads. He talks about the power that is held in our ancestral line, specifically on the masculine or paternal ancestral line, and how when you do ancestral work, you unlock the power that's held in that line, and the healing then supports you, the line before you, as well as the kids and the ancestral line that comes after you. I'd never really heard about this stuff till I first met Tom on this ancestral healing program that I was talking about at the beginning of this. And I'm really interested in what that is because it's not something that I have spent a lot of time on. And so inside this conversation, you're going to hear Tom talking about the importance of reconnecting with our ancestral line and just how important it is to reclaim the power that's held there. Tom also talks about the importance of listening to your intuition and how to receive guidance on what's important for you. We share some practical tools and tips on the wisdoms of reconnecting with your emotions. He talks about some issues to be aware of if you're going to consciously choose the path of non-monogamy, meaning connecting consciously with more than one partner. And one piece which I'd like to share, which was so powerful, was Tom spoke about his initiation process of going out into the wilderness to find himself and connecting with what he calls your unique kernel. And he describes this as your unique gift that's yours and only yours to bring to the world. It's a powerful conversation, and I'm really excited to share it with you. And before I jump into this conversation, carrying on from this theme of connecting to your unique gift, we've got a really powerful invitation for those people that are either wanting to find your unique kernel, your unique voice, or are already on the process of bringing your gifts to the world, meaning you know what is yours to share and what's yours to bring to the world. But you need some support in getting clear on how to find your voice, how to find your audience, and then how to bring that to the world in a way that also allows you to get paid. The journey of the soulpreneur is really the man who is clear about what his mission is, meaning his work that his soul came to do in this lifetime, and at the same time is using that mission to generate an income, the entrepreneur part. So the soulpreneur, the journey of the soulpreneur, is really based upon three important components. Number one, the overall strategy, which is finding your voice, finding the direction that you want to go, and starting. The second component is the daily tactical strategies that help support you with this vision that you create in step one. And so that looks like understanding how to show up on the internet, how to create small groups, show up in person, speak from a stage, write a book, whatever is your specific delivery method for your authentic voice is important to find in stage two. And the third important component of this is who is it that you need to be to show up to bring your gifts to the world and also get paid. Meaning you could have your authentic voice dialed in. You could have the strategy of what you want to bring to the world. Like I'm going to write a blog post and I'm going to bring my magic to the world through words. But until you show up as the person that you need to be in order to create this business and actually get paid to stand on the stage or to write the words that you need and find the audience, if you don't have all three of these essential components, you're never going to be able to bring your magic to the world. And there's no point in having your unique voice if you don't find the audience to listen to it, and then you can't get paid to be able to receive the energy back to keep you in flow and keep you going to serve your mission. If that sounds interesting to you, I will share a link in the show notes of this episode to something called Ignite Your Authentic Voice. This is a free 3-part one-on-one session with the brand expert that has helped me and the Fathers, Sons, Brothers brands become globally recognized brands. And Alex has got a limited amount of space to support integrated leaders who are looking to find their voice, find their audience, bring their magic to the world, and then get paid to do that. If that's interesting to you, I'll leave a link in the show notes below. We're going to cover this exact topic in the conversation with Tom Hirons. So without further ado, welcome Tom Hirons. Welcome to the Fathers, Sons, Brothers podcast. I am stoked to be hanging out today with a brother who I'm really getting to know on this podcast, whose name is Tom Hirons. Welcome to the show, bro. Thank you for being part of this.
Hey, thanks for having me on here. It's a delight.
Sweet.
It's Hirons, by the way. I'm compelled to correct everyone.
Thank you.
Even though it's a ridiculous thing to try and correct. The world is convinced that I'm Tom Hirons. So
the other golden rule for a podcast host is to check that before he presses record. So I realized that as I pressed record, I'm like, did I check? No, I'm sure I've got this.
Yeah. If I was a more graceful human being, I'd have let it slip past. But I'm compelled to correct
I appreciate
people.
it. Welcome to the show, brother. Thanks for being part of this.
Delighted to be here.
Our conversations tend to be supporting men, and one of the areas of conversation that I like to understand is the human story. I think when men come together and have conversations and realize that we share similar themes and challenges, there's a lot of healing in that, and I want to get to that. But I want to get the audience to know who you are through the lens of the roles that you've played as a father, son, and brother. Like, what have those roles been for you in your life?
Father, son, brother. Let's take father first. So I've got two sons, 9 and 5. Um, just today, I've taken them back to their mums for a few days. So I co-parent 50-50 with their mum, Rima Staines, who's an amazing artist and lives about 5 or 6 miles away from here in South Devon in the UK. And yeah, I mean, what can you say about being a father? Do you have kids?
I don't have physical
No.
children of my own, so I've got a different timeline. But I'm really interested in the adventure that unfolds when you choose to go in
Yeah.
that path. It's got to be one of the most. I can't even imagine the surrender that's required to be a parent and just acceptance of yourself every day.
Well, I mean, absolutely. What's interesting for me is trying to discern sometimes what is intrinsic to the experience of being a father and what is the experience of being a father in atomized, broken society in late stage capitalism, where you're attempting to do all the work of the village and be everything for your kids, and do your thing in your nuclear family, and all of that kind of thing. There's all of that. I have never experienced such uh, devastation as being a father. Um, and I,
In what
you know,
theme? Just because of what the world looks like that sort of devastation? Or what does it feel?
it's
What's the story
just
behind that?
it's so hard. It's just so hard, you know. And maybe for some folk it's easy. Uh, I love it. It's the most extraordinary thing, and could talk endlessly about the love and the initiatory quality of becoming a father, becoming a parent, or even just taking that role, whether it's as a biological father or as a stepfather, or having that caring role for someone, the way it changes you and shifts you around the wheel of whatever cosmological map you use, it shifts things. It moves you from still being able to be focused on yourself as the primary object of your life, and suddenly, no, you're not the most important thing anymore. And
Hmm.
that's for most of us, that's a hard slap in the face that takes us the rest of our life to get over, especially if you're essentially quite a self-centered person, as I have experienced myself to be. Yeah, as a creative person, there's the constant fascination with my own process, my own connection with the imaginal or with the other world and all of that. And when you become a father, that's a different thing. If you've still got that going on, because you're as an artist, you're compelled to be in that creative whirlwind, but also it's not about you. The show isn't about you, uh, and that's extraordinary. So yeah.
I want to ask you something on this point because I feel like what's coming up for me is so pertinent, which is my work and message is really around the idea that my world is a reflection of the relationship that I have with myself. Like prioritizing this relationship first means that's the only way that I can fill my cup enough to be in service. How do you balance what you've just shared with me with being a dad? So, like, at what point are you not showing up enough for yourself that you can be a dad, that your cup's empty, that you actually need to take some time away to get reconnected, fall in love with yourself, take the
Hmm.
rest that you need versus the actual requirements of having two boys on the clock? Like, how do you balance
Well,
that?
yeah. It's so in my cosmology, there is that relationship with yourself, and how resourced you are individually. But there is also your relationship with your community. So that is another well. And there's your relationship with, we could call it spirit, and your relationship with the the living world around us. So all of these things are going on, and all of those, in the way that we do parenting, all of them suffer. I paint such a bleak picture of it. You know, and I think someone has to, because most of the parents that I know, we're clinging on by the skin of our teeth. You know, we're doing our
Yeah.
best under
Yeah.
ridiculous circumstances. So if you're yourself well, your soul well is running dry, and you've severed your connection to the wider realm of spirit, and the land, because you're too busy trying to make ends meet, and your connection with community is broken or was never there in the first place, then it's a hard road, and most of us are running on empty. Fortunately, I'm lucky, yeah. So I make my living from writing poetry, teaching people to write poetry, running courses and things like that. So I'm able to dwell in that world and, do what sustains me in that world. So I can take time to go to Dartmoor, which I live on the edge of, here in South Devon, to spend time nourishing that aspect of myself, which also feeds the poetry, to connect with the land. Um, my connection with community comes and goes.
Okay.
It's that's that's how it is in the 21st century. I don't spend as much time with people in my kitchen, round my table, as much as I would like, but more and more. But it's hard. It's a balance all the time. But it's the same whether you have kids or not, isn't it? In that respect.
My story is one of tracking the inner CEO in me that's continually go, go, go. And it's like, because I'm putting my work into the world through this podcast and through building a team and the men's work and men's circles, some part of my internal narrative says, you're not there yet. You've chosen not to have kids. So if I can get
Mm,
going, like get up every single day. And I've got a strong drill sergeant that can take me out of the present moment. Yeah, I've chosen a different timeline. But another part of me is like, okay, now this has to fucking really matter or something like that,
mhm,
because I've
mhm.
chosen not to be a parent. And I made that choice consciously, and part of it was selfish. I'm like, fuck, I just love my life the way it is. It just feels so good
Yeah.
being in this space with my partner. I've got access to resources, and you know, it just didn't happen that kids came into my life, and we made the call, my partner and I, to not be connected and be parents. And so I was like, okay, if I don't do that, then what? Like, because that there's a meaning piece potentially missing, and a whole timeline that closes when I made that choice. And there's a lot of mourning that has to happen. I came from a world where it was expected that you got married and had kids. That's what made life meaningful. And I'm actually interested to know if my choice is true, because what I've more recently been coming up against is, at some level, I came from a world where I never considered my ancestral line so much. I knew I had parents, I knew my grandparents, they passed away. I know it's England and Germany, more or less, on my paternal and maternal side. And that's where I ended it. I didn't really
Mm.
matter too much about that. And I'm now realizing there's something quite big about that choice. If you consider that there's an ancestral line of beings that went before me to get me here, I feel a little embarrassed to say there was no consideration of them when I made my choice. It was purely about me. And so I'm like, I've been sitting a little bit with that.
That's a big one, eh? Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting, isn't it, going, because we connected through the Ancestral healing, the terribly named
Hmm.
um, workshop that Daniel Four put together, that I was part of the
Yeah.
crew of. So obviously the ancestral
Yeah.
stuff is something that's more present for you now. Yeah.
I'd love to go there, because I'm talking from my firsthand experience and from what I know from the world from which I came. There was not a lot of consideration for the power of what it meant to understand your ancestors and the role that they could play, if any, in my world in the present moment.
Hmm.
And so the ancestral healing piece, I think it resonated for me in some ways, because I recognize that in my partner, she's somehow more connected to this line of work. But I see a lot of men in the West tend not to be as connected to or aware of the power or disconnection of power that we have from our ancestral line. So maybe you want to, how did you end up in on that forum, and what's your relationship with your ancestors, for example? How does that sit in your world?
There's a question. These are big questions. Um, I ended up on that in that workshop um, uh, because Daniel got in touch with me uh, and said, "I've got this idea. Do you want to do something?" I think he'd come across one of my poems. I think maybe the Dead Fathers, um, and that had turned him on to how I'm approaching uh, my relationship with the world, not kind of necessarily of the ancestors, but the world of the underworld, essentially, in the shadow, and the world of those who have come before, for sure. Um, and interestingly, it's not something that I do a lot of conscious work with, and yet I spend as much time as I can in my bone marrow. Yeah. Um, when I'm doing qigong, which is not as often as it used to be, uh, and neigong and these kind of things, I spend a lot of time getting into where my bones are and getting into the bone marrow in my body, in my skeleton, and that is the place for me where the kind of the echoes of the ancestors and a feeling sense for me of that world exists. Yeah, because I'm a super imagination person. There's a lot going on up here. Yeah, but I'm actually much more interested in what's running in my muscles and my blood and my bones and all the kind of the dark and light fluids in my body and that kind of thing. And so when I go there, there are this sense of that place, which I guess other people work with more consciously as, in the realm of the ancestors. Um, my knowledge or no, not my knowledge, but my feeling world doesn't really extend much beyond my grandparents. Um, you know, I know some of the family tree beyond that. Um, and I've done, the DNA tests that half of us do these days, and all the little surprises that throws up. But my grandfathers, I feel them not as a presence, yeah, not in any kind of mystical kind of way at all, but I feel my mm, my still present hunger to be part of their circle of trust or circle of knowledge or circle of belonging. Yeah. I didn't know them particularly well. Um, my granddad, George Hirons, grandpa, Jack Cornforth, he was a farmer who became a mounted policeman in Palestine and in it's now Zimbabwe. George Hirons worked on the railways. Uh, and when I'm writing poetry, this is a very roundabout way of coming to something, but trust me, uh,
Go for it.
when I'm writing poetry, I became aware over the last 5 years that I am writing towards a number of different figures or energies or entities. Yeah, when I make a statement in a poem, uh, I began to question who am I saying this to? Not my audience, but who am I actually addressing? Yeah, and there was one big figure who I call the Queen of Heaven. Yeah, who is her own thing. Yeah, and I write about her and to her, and she's kind of I have an intense devotional relationship to her, and I've just put this book of poetry out called The Queen of Heaven, which is all directed to her kind of her realm. But there's also my sons, and there's also my grandfathers, I'm aware, not through choice, but just, yes, I am addressing these words to them. Yeah. And with my grandfathers, that's partly because I want the flicker of affection and recognition and, yeah, the nod of, in this country, I don't know how it is elsewhere, but I know a lot of male friends. When we're approved of by the next generation up or the one after that. So like old farmers, yeah, or old guys around town, and they give you the nod of, yeah, you did well, yeah. It's like gold, yeah. It's like it fills a reservoir that nothing else can go into. And it's like, oh God, that part of me which is desperate for that that element, that nutrition, that quality in my heart, is
Yes.
suddenly touched. And so when I write, I'm aware of that relationship with my grandfathers and just wanting, okay, yeah, tell me I did well. And they're, and
Mm.
I have a pretty honest relationship with them or my internal image of them.
Hey, FSB crew, a quick message to say 97% of you who watch or consume this podcast are not subscribed. Subscribing to the show really supports us to be able to grow and reach more people, as well as include and improve the quality and caliber of guests that we have on this show. Our goal is to get this number down to 70%. And so if you have ever received any value from the content and conversations on this podcast, please consider subscribing. It really supports us and the work that we're doing. Now, back to the show. Yeah, you're speaking into, I think, what is maybe at a generational difference or a more subtle realm. What is the boy crisis or masculine crisis of young boys not having that energy in their lives because they have absent fathers, because they're, raised in a world where they don't have access to men to give them that nod when they've done something well. And yeah, not having access to that is, I think, at the heart of what some of the challenges that masculinity is facing at the moment.
Yeah, yeah, and not having that bringing in, you're one of
Hmm.
us. Um, you
Yes.
know, then what are we left with if we're not getting that from our, father's generation or our grandfather's generation? Then
Yeah.
all that we're kind of left with is kind of a harsh array of scornful judges rather than human beings. Uh, and I was talking about this in the ancestral thing. I think just this the scorn of our internal fathers, uncles, grandfathers, great uncles, the imagining that we have not done well in their eyes, and what a weight that is on our capacity to live joyfully and to live with a sense of being able to stand up straight, you know. And so many of us, we've stumbled through our adolescence into our adulthood, uh, not knowing what we're doing, but also with this vague sense that the next generation up and the one above that, and God knows about the ones before that, they're looking at us going, what the fuck are you doing? Yeah. And that destroys us.
So how do we repair that part? How do we get reconnected? Is it past the point of saving, or like how do you see what's the way through here?
What's the way through? I mean, work that our generation, if I can put us in the same generation, I don't know how old you are, the work that we're doing to try and, reclaim some of our broken parts, and look at some of this stuff, the attempt to be better, um, parent figures or parental figures to the generation below us, and the attempt to reach out in brotherhood and, go, fuck, we're all in the same boat here. There's a lot of difference between our experiences, of course, But for most of us, the situation is that we don't trust each other, or our trust has massive holes in it. But, they might be particular to
Yeah.
particular circumstances and things, but it's pretty broken. Our sense of, how do I do this being a person thing, let alone how do I be a man, and all these maps, these different maps I'm being handed, which are mostly just complete fragments and contradictory, all of that stuff, the score, to come together and go, yeah, I'm lost, I'm lost here, but I look, I found some stepping stones over here, and share bits of the map that we've explored, and try and stay conscious. We get into all the old patterns of being competitive with each other and trying to outdo each other in our, whatever aspect of work we're doing and all of that. But I believe, you know, at the root, in a way, is men. A lot of what I say is not about men, but we're talking about men. So let's stay with it. Men coming together to sit together, to sit around a fire and just go, tell us, tell us how it is, tell us how it's been, tell us what you hope for, and to start that process of talking to each other. And it doesn't have to be complicated. And that's what I'm interested in at the moment, is kind of, yeah, getting people to just to sit around together and talk.
I want to come back to that because that's actually a question that I want to come to. But one of the things you said in the Ancestral video is another way of saying something that I've been saying, which is I think your words were, "We come together magnificent and broken." Like, can you share what you mean by that?
I'm all of my work really is rooted in the tension between poles of things. Um,
Yes.
I'm I'm also an acupuncturist. I come from that Chinese medicine yin yang
Ah, cool.
background, so I'm
Okay.
always interested in this, yes, but also this, and what's the relationship between those two things. And in my writing, one of the qualities that I aspire to, and one of the qualities that I love when I encounter it, is this thing duende. The force that comes into a room when something significant is happening. In a performance, we feel it sometimes in live music or theatre, or someone speaking truth, things like this. Something happens, hairs on our skin stand on end, and all of this kind of stuff. And Duende thrives in the tension between opposites. So when I speak about magnificence and brokenness, it's like, well, yeah, there's aspects that, the parts of us that are just radiant and vast and, you know, divine, all of that. And then there are parts of us that have been, that are crushed, and fragmented, and there are parts of us that are mean and cowardly and not up for taking the brave step and all of that. And one of my principal things, and my experiences of what actually allows healing to occur, is the welcoming of all those parts. Bring them all in. Bring them all in. Come on. Let's stop pretending. Come in, sit by the fire, and yeah, be your shittest self. Bring them into.
Yeah, dude. I fucking when I didn't knew we were supposed to have this conversation. There's so much resonance in what you're saying around parts. Like, I have my own body of work around parts integration and understanding these various parts of ourselves, and it's like, yeah, the same pieces around. You're a god and you're fallible. Never forget either. Like, don't pretend you're not a god, and also don't pretend you're perfect, because neither of those build trust. Like, your magnificence and your messiness is both part of you. And I agree with you. I think the healing journey is less to do with actually anything to do with healing, except reclaiming those parts of ourselves that we've stopped loving or abandoned or shamed or whatever those things are. Just bring them in and
Yeah.
love the fuck out of them is the healing path from how I see it.
Yeah, I think largely, yes. I think, there is healing as well, and there is the possibility of moving from states of brokenness to less brokenness. But there's this great James Hillman quote in there about the purpose of therapy not necessarily being to heal, but to bless the broken parts. And I love that. Yeah,
Yes.
it's like
Yeah.
to come to that for that blessing and just to go, oh yeah, as you are, come in. Yeah, but I'm
That polarities thinking that you're talking about is something I'm interested as well, because it feels like we're living in a world where people are calling you to be like one color or the other, and there tends to be no gray area, and that's yeah, those 2 points of tension are the very nature of what it means to understand energetic flow, meaning like, what's the right way to raise a kid? Is it super strict, or is it give them all the space in the world? Well, it's a little bit of both. It's like, you got to go in between and navigate those two polarities, and too much of one or too much of another is neither good. There isn't a good or a bad. There's a healthy balance between these two polarities. But I feel like we live in a world where it's like, are you I don't know, a red? No, I'm a
mhm,
blue.
mhm.
But then you're then everything that relates to that. And it feels like that's where we go into separation, where it's like, well, I'm not any of those things actually.
Yeah, oh, completely. And I think, I don't know, but it feels like it's certainly been like that for a long time, that urge towards kind of crystallization into one aspect of one way of approaching the world. But, for me, mm, one of the key things that I try to track is basically in terms of those dualities is the way open or is the way closed? You know, when you're trying to do something or you're engaging in a situation or with someone, it's basically, is
Mm.
this the time? Is this not the time? And
How do you track that?
with with
That's mastery, I
the
think. It's living in a flow state, right?
well, we have the navigational tool. We have the compass. I don't know. It's something that's in there somewhere. And we all know it. We all look back in retrospect and go, oh yeah, actually, yeah, what was I thinking of? I was trying to push against a locked door. Or yes, there was the moment when I could feel that there was an opening there. And instead I went for the protected, you know, I put my armor
Mm.
on, so it's like
Hmm.
open, close, open, close. I don't know. I mean, I'm shit at it and I get it wrong constantly.
No, bro,
But
I mean, it's magic, and I'm
that's
trying to understand this because this is not, this is how to do it, to really listen, because I believe that's true. Like we do at some level have this inner guide that's guiding us if we give it enough time to listen. And I think we live in a world where we perhaps haven't given that intuition the presence that it deserves. I know I come from a world where it's like, if I can't prove it on a spreadsheet, I'll make the decision with the data. My gut didn't really play a role in it. And I can look back now and be like, if I'd listened to my gut on quite a few things, the answers were there. I just, chose not to. So to cultivate that present moment awareness, to be like, okay, well, just feel into this. What is it? To
mm,
realize that there
mm,
is a voice there and it is guiding us, is to live in perhaps I don't know, like maybe a more subtle way. Life may be a little bit more easy if you're listening. That moment of recognizing, yeah, where something came back. And I'll give you an example for me. Like in a relationship, I was head over heels with this woman, and there was this moment one day when I asked her something, and her response was out. Like she didn't want the same things I did, and I could feel it in
mm,
my system. But because she had ticked so many other boxes, I just continued for a while longer. But like you said, there's that moment when you're like, and it's something I say to people that I'm working with sometimes. It's like, it might be hard, but it's not complicated. We almost
yeah.
always know what we need to do. It might be a hard decision to make, but when you tune in and listen, like you said, we know most of the time we know what would be best for us.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it is complicated though, because there are so many different parts that have conflicting needs or desires about any particular thing. And it's there's
Hmm.
always the question of which part is in the driver's seat, or what's going to be the result of the council of those parts coming together and deciding by
Yep.
committee. uh,
Hmm.
but that sense of, yeah, open or closed, it's like, I think, and I don't know, because I don't have mastery of um, anything in kind of martial arts sense at all. But it's like that knowing is what you develop when you're working that way. And for me, the closest I get to a martial art is poetry. So knowing, is this the right line to come next? Have I fallen off the path? Am I still tending to the same energy, and following the thread that I'm trying to follow, to bring this thing, from the other world into this world? Or have I just started making stuff up? So that discernment, I think you can hone that sense in any art, or in any skill, really. It just requires that honesty, doesn't it? I guess, which is what I'm trying to get better at. It's like, oh yeah, lost it there, refound it, lost it again.
Do you think that creative process of being a poet for you are two polarities of nature and nurture, or how do you see that? Like, is it a practiced and learned skill, or is it something that just you need to open and let come through you?
I don't know. I don't know. All I can say is, mm, I wanted to be a writer uh, from my late teens. Yeah, I was good at sciences, so I went to university and I studied theoretical physics and logic and that kind of thing, and I was shit at it. I was really clever, but I was rubbish at being a student, and I just drank. I didn't really know how to be in the world like most of us, and I was really young, so I just drank, and then I dropped out, and then I went back to university after a while. This was up in Scotland, and dropped out again, and I started writing. I was trying to write. I was trying to write fiction. I was trying to write literary fiction so that I would be respected by, you know people with fancy books on their shelves and that kind of thing. Uh, and poetry didn't feature in my world really much at all. And there's a lot of stories that I could tell about how poetry came into my life. But ultimately, it wasn't until I did my first wilderness fast up in Snowdonia with a guy called David Wendelberry uh, back in 2004, so 20 years ago now. Um, that so wilderness fast, the core of which is 4 days and nights fasting by yourself uh, up in the Welsh hills with just a tarp.
Snowdonia
Um,
sounds cold, by the way.
it's more wet than cold, to be honest.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it was summer, so it wasn't cold, but it was dreary.
Okay.
It was really just, yeah, it rained a lot, and wasn't at all the
So how old are you
experience
when
that.
you do this?
So I'm 51 now, so 31, I guess. Yep, when I did that.
Okay.
Um, and it was like, I took it very, very seriously, and I had this feeling of it being like a missed initiation that I was going to undertake, and that I'd come out the other side of it a man in some way, and it's going to be this glorious
Yeah.
ascendant experience, and I've prepared for it a lot. I know that I'm going towards some symbolic death, rebirth experience. My soul is deeply, deeply into this. Yeah, my head is kind of struggling to catch up, but it knows that something important is happening. And so I go to Wales, and I find my spot to do this fasting, and it's beautiful. It's like this oak glade, in the summer sun, and it's magnificent, and it's just going to be the whole thing's going to be beautiful. It's not beautiful
Yeah.
at all. Spoiler. It rains. It's just emotional torment. I break the rules. I end up eating when you're supposed to be fasting. On the first day, thinking, "Oh, I've fucked up this sacred rite of and all kinds of stuff," and it goes not how I expected it to go. But I am blessed with experience, possibly on the third or fourth day, of I can still picture it clear as day. I'm standing just kind of on the edge of my circle. There's a little bank with some younger trees and some gnarly old ones and lots of dead wood. And I'm peering into the forest because I still think that a vision is something that I'm going to see. Yeah,
Uh-huh.
like kind of like a hallucinatory thing, or just a parting of the veils. Yeah, and and I'm trying really hard. My eyes, like, if I just look in the right way, I'll see through. And for about 20 seconds, I'm blessed with this experience where it's as if all the layers of my being are like shells that have a uh, little hole in them, a little aperture through which you
Yeah.
can see. And there's this kind of the outer aspects of myself, my kind of visible personality, my outward facing self, and then all these shells and shells and shells, each with their little window. And for about 30 seconds, just out of nowhere, having fasted and prayed and done my own self-made ceremony, it's as if all the shells line up and the apertures all line up so that I can see down into the middle of it. Just in turn, this is a kind of internal image experience. And I see down to the core, the kernel, yeah, the seed image of myself, I would call it these days. And I look in there, and what I see, the language for it is warrior poet. And this is on the one hand, as with most beautiful things, on the one hand, this is news to me because I don't write poetry, or the poetry that I've written is really shit. Yeah. But on the other hand, of course, yeah, poetry, real poetry, the real poetics of life was what I was always interested in. And so I take this kernel and I take it away from the experience of the fast. And I know that I have seen something of my essential identity that I am blessed to have seen. And I carry it and I carry it, and it changes my life for sure. All that ascendant stuff, I'm not there anymore. I'm down in the leaf litter and the mycelium and the stench and stink of the kind of the fertile underworld. Everything is kind of downward rooting, decaying for years and years and years. Whereas before I was a cosmic zoomer, you know. It was all Reiki and shamanic and, all just kind of I am undifferentiated consciousness. This was very different. So I took that away and I started writing
Just I
poetry
want to ask you something. This underworld journey
in
that
the
you're talking
days
about
after
is
that.
years and years of
Yeah,
just trying
for
to
sure.
find your way with this new knowledge. Your life looks like is that what you mean by that, or is it just this experience that you
It's
have on this?
yeah, what I it's after. Yeah, yeah, after. Suddenly I'm interested in and kind of compelled and constantly in the murkier depths of soul work rather than spirit work. Yeah, if we can speak about that duality of kind of an ascendant and a descending, where spirit is undifferentiated consciousness and soul is your particular storied experience of life on this planet. yeah, and then I tried to live it.
What's the theme of warrior mean
It's
to
like,
you?
okay, if that's who I am,
You've spent some time on the poet piece. What does the warrior piece mean for you?
yeah, it means using what skills I have in bold service. So not just the poet as hermit, not just poet as mystic, but someone engaged in the struggle for not just self-realization or whatever, but for the diminishment of suffering in the world, for opposing desecration, standing up, speaking out, learning to use language and eloquence in ways which have effective power to ultimately slow the progress and, in my wildest dreams, defeat the what I call the devouring one, that force that is around, just eating up everything.
Your transmission is actually got to one of the questions
Yeah.
that I had for you today, which was, I can't remember where I saw you say that stories and words have the ability to change the world, or a version of that. Like,
Mm.
how do you see the role of story and narrative shaping the world?
There's all sorts of levels to that, aren't there? There's kind of everyday levels where we carry stories, and the stories we tell ourselves and each other about what we are, what the world is, they shape our experience. That's there. And then there's the kind of the political uh, layer of, if you're being told a story about how things are happening, then you believe that story, then that shapes your experience. And narrative framing, who controls the story, that's part of the information war in any conflict, for example. The stories that are told, who writes the stories afterwards as well. But then, what I'm interested in, there's loads more that I could say about that, but I want to skip to the particular bit that I'm interested in at the moment. Because I've been a storyteller, an oral storyteller for 25, 30 years, something like that, telling traditional folk tales. I lived in a traveling storytelling theatre and traveled around, telling Russian folk tales, Romany tales, Scottish traveller tales, Welsh tales, all this kind of stuff. Very beautiful, very romantic. And those stories have their own power. Yeah, they're spirits, they're people, and you share them with people, and then they go away with that knowledge and that experience, carrying that story, and that story goes out into the world with them. And that's another thing. That's another beautiful thing. What I'm interested in at the moment is about the ways in which, throughout history, there have been people in every society that I know of, or at least every sane society that's worthy of the name a culture. There have been people who have the ability to affect external reality through the use of language directly. So, for example, there was a story that for a short time I used to tell, that was a story from Siberia, Chukchi story. Amazing story. I found it in a really obscure old book, in the way that storytellers do when they're searching for the next story that no one's heard. It has some value, in that sense of acquisitive sense of pillaging other cultures for the good stories. I did that, you know, uh, and I found this story, and it was great, and it was weird, and I knew everyone was going to love it because it kind of made my hair stand on end. And I told it a few times, and then there was this niggling sense, yeah, talking about intuitions and that navigational feelings and things we ignore and things we don't. There was this niggling sense of, I'm being an asshole here. I'm doing the thing that I least want to do in the world. One of the things anyway of just totally inappropriate cultural appropriation. So I went back to the text that I'd got it from, and I reread it and saw what I'd seen before but had chosen to ignore, as you do, that this whole story is a story that is told to calm the wind when there's a storm in that area. Yeah. And I'm telling it basically as entertainment,
Mm.
but it's not that
Mm.
technology. That's not what
Right.
it's for. It's for affecting the weather. And there have been people who do that in, all sorts of shapes and forms all over the place. Yeah. So that's kind of what I'm talking about. One of the things that I'm talking about, and one of the things that I'm interested in an age of climate chaos, rising fascism, and all the shit that's going down. It's like, okay, how do we work with that energy as well? If there have been spells, stroke stories for changing the weather, then you know I'm just a fledgling. I'm just an apprentice on this journey, but I'm interested in what might we do to affect things in magical ways. That's basically what we're talking
Fuck yes. Oh,
about.
Brie, I love it. Yeah. Yeah,
Fuck
so
yes.
good. I'd love
Yeah.
to invite you to share a story here, and I'm going to give you one space, but it may not be the space for this particular story. I've seen in your vortex a story about a young boy who gives half his soul to a falcon. I don't know if that's ready to be shared here or whether you have
Uh,
something else that you'd like to bring on this platform. But yeah, brother, share some of your
I
magic.
but that's very kind, and a lovely space to be opened, Gareth. Thank you. But before I do that, I can tell you the story about the story of the boy and
Cool.
the falcon,
That's a story
because it's
itself.
been going on for quite a
30
long
years, you
time.
said?
I'll do that in a minute. Yeah, I'll
Okay.
come back to that. But I have curiosity as well, um, which is essentially how did you arrive where you are now? You know, in whatever sense that you want to take that, because it sounds like you've been on quite a journey from spreadsheets to interlocking hexagonal cells on the wooden wall behind you, the light flickering. That's not spreadsheet world. What happened, man? Where did it go wrong?
Yeah, I think it was, again, this type of question has multi layers. It's all just the stories that I've chosen to tell about myself at different times in my life based on the upbringing that I had and the stories that I was told by my parents about certain things and the world that I grew up in South Africa. And yeah, just to put it into, it was the classic hero's journey type when I followed the original
Mhm.
path to go and create what I thought would be a meaningful life and realized in my mid 30s that I'd ticked all of the boxes and I was looking down at another 35 years of doing the same stuff. And I'm like, some part of me is dying and I didn't know how to say it. What it looked like in my world was, yeah, addiction, feeling very uncomfortable being by myself, always keeping busy with all the things that kept the boxes ticked, which was make money, look after the body, work out, behind the scenes, connecting with as many women as possible to distract myself from myself and cocaine and alcohol and
Mhm.
all the things. And so, yeah, I hit a bottom at some point in my mid 30s that was like, I don't know if I want to just keep doing this. And I could see a timeline where I just stayed on this path and I hadn't found myself. And it seemed like everybody around in my world had, they were getting married and having kids. And I was like, whoa, I don't know if I'm there. And I
Mm,
didn't trust myself to get married, which seemed like the next thing to do in your late 20s or early 30s. That's what we were all on this path to do. Anyway, it left me an opportunity to sell my business and go traveling and yeah, just connect and fall in love with myself again and open up a whole lot of rabbit holes around, yeah, some alternative narratives. But what was more interesting was recognizing how much of myself I had cut off and didn't have access to because I didn't want to open a box that was labeled
mm,
spirituality.
mm.
That's what it was. And I think the story and the wound came from some sense of a religious upbringing, conservative Christian upbringing, which was like, you should have one partner, you should sleep with one woman, your wife, and yeah, you want to make sure you keep your shit together because otherwise you're going to be judged at some point. And I don't think that resonated with me. So in this phase of my life, I found some resonance with being an atheist. I was like, nothing fucking matters. When the lights go out, the lights go out. So I might as well just do what I've come to do, which seemed to be make money and build my business. And I found it a hard way to live because then nothing matters. There's nothing else beyond this. And so that was, I think my soul was calling for something else and I didn't know what that was. And 42 countries, loads of lovers, Vipassana retreats, studying Buddhism, going to Thailand, time in India, darkness retreats, and then interlocking hexagonal boxes and a candle, creating a podcast, doing men's work. That's sort of the short version. But yeah, in that journey was this recognition that like, holy shit, I'm the same person that I've always been. But everything that I had, like a story around money, I could change that. And I noticed that my reality about that particular thing shifted. And I was really interested in recognizing the role that story plays and how important the cultivation of present moment awareness is in order for me to be able to see the story. Because until I can see the story that's running, your inner part, whoever it is that's got the microphone in that moment, that's like, we're all going to die. Or the part that's like, you're just fine, bro. Just take a breath. You'll be okay. You always have been. Like, if you can catch those moments, I spend less time in the fear story. And I've seen how that is unfolded in my world around me. And I've noticed how when I've changed my story about relationship, I've manifested a partnership that I don't think I could have done with my old narrative around story. So yeah, it's become the basis of wanting to have these conversations. And then the angle of men's work came in because I looked back and I saw myself or see myself as a bridge between, I don't know, I would maybe call it the matrix and the world I'm in now, like some sense of, just not recognizing the power that we have, disconnected from some stories where we began with the conversation around our ancestors. I think that's a story that nobody in my old world is talking about. No one's sitting around considering this stuff. And it feels like we're cutting ourselves off from those very stories that could be saving us. So yeah, that's the short version of the last 20 years.
Yeah. And Guatemala.
I'm in Guatemala. When I arrived in, when I arrived in Latin America for the first time, I'd been in Asia, and I was like, wow, it's so different to South Africa. It felt all new and amazing. I know subsequently, having studied some energy, spiritual stuff, that we have chakras in our body, and I'm double Taurus, which means I'm sort of a body guy. Like, I'm in my body a lot. I've got a lot of pleasures around food and intimacy and being in the body. And I understand that the world has a similar chakra system where Asia tends to be more upper chakra, mental type stuff. And something about coming to this part of the world, when I arrived in Latin America, some part of me just went, like, relax. There was just a general, and I was like, okay, this is where I need to be. And so when I listened to that and made the decision to be in Guatemala for this time, a couple of weeks later, I met my partner, and this is how my life has just beautifully unfolded into the amazing life I have.
Beautiful, beautiful. The way was open, and
I made the decision at the
felt
bottom.
it,
That was the thing.
And there was
when I was feeling, really squished at the bottom, and I felt like my life was collapsing, I made the difficult decision, and that was it. But I've actually gone through a process of reframing even that story. The hero's journey is the hero who comes back home with the goods. I'm actually more like, the hero was the Gareth who was like fucking burning it at both ends to try and wake me the fuck up. Like, I see that version of myself as the hero because he did more work than the version of me that was lying on the beach in Thailand, continually Instagram photos, all of that stuff. Like, the Gareth Bickering that was really at the bottom and like screaming and shaking. Like, I think he's the one that I need to be celebrating. And instead, I can sometimes have this decision of like, I don't resonate with that version of myself. I'm not a man who makes decisions like that anymore. But that's a separation from that part, instead of looking at him as being the hero, bringing him back in. And like, that's really the part of me that got me onto this path. So I think there's story interwoven into all of that.
Totally. Thank
Thank you
you.
for asking.
That's beautiful to hear. What an adventure. What an
Yeah.
adventure. I that piece at the end about, othering those parts of ourselves or those selves that we've been, or kind of the way that we see, yeah, who was the hero? What was that energy? Um, I reached a point, I don't know, some point over the last 5 years where I really saw how my attempts to live in certain ways and um, to be to get it right, whatever the terms of getting it right were in any particular phase, were just creating more and more kind of cascading sets of
Mm.
exiles. Yeah, it was like, putting, you know, I was wrong then, and I was
Uh-huh.
wrong then, and I was wrong then. At some hypothetical point in the future, it might be now. I'm gonna get it right,
Mm.
and then I'll have this version of myself, which is, which I can take the applause. It's like, yeah, thank you very much. I'm on the podium and all of that. But actually, no, I'm still exiling parts. Yeah, not that. Still creating shadow, right? Or maintaining the shadow, still feeding it, creating things to put in the bag, selves to put in the bag. And I realized this, and I was like, I'm not gonna spend my whole fucking life doing this. Yeah, I'm gonna bring them in. And the poetry collection just before, uh, what's the current one
Queen of
called?
Heaven.
Queen of Heaven, is called At the Orphan's Door. And I was working with this internal image of this feasting hall, in which kind of the parts of me were dwelling. Yeah, this kind of very, I don't know, kind of Anglo-Saxon or Lord of the Rings kind of image of a stone hall. There's not much in it, but a big fire, a long table in the middle, and some benches and some chairs at the fire, some stools and that kind of thing. Some stairs going up over there. I don't know where they go. But there's these big oak doors, yeah, at the front of this hall, and I was working with this not in a particularly therapeutic way, but it was just an image sense, kind of half image, half kinesthetic kind of sense in my front, kind of from my belly up to my heart. And because of various circumstances, separating from the mother of my kids, and starting to move in the world of polyamory, and the death of my mother, and all sorts of life stuff happening. I started to notice when I stayed with this image that every so often there would be a kind of energetic knock at those huge doors, uh, and I started to get quite good at hearing when that knock was happening. And I would go to those doors, and there would be some orphan, some exile that had split off from my acceptable self at some point along the way. And I realized that it was my job to bring them in and sit them by the fire, give them a blanket, give them food, and listen to them. Yeah. And that was it. That was it. Not to put them on the throne, yeah, not to do anything, but just bring them in. And that became my mantra. Just bring them in, bring them in, bring them in. So that's where that kind of that parts thing of just like just as you are and no more exiles. And it's like, can we stop creating exiled versions of ourselves? It doesn't serve anyone. It doesn't help anyone.
Oh, so good, bro.
So even if they're things that we're ashamed of, you know, it's just like, doesn't mean we have to elevate them and kind of suggest that they're right, but that they're our kin. You know, bring
They
them
got
in,
us to where we are right
bring
now.
them all
And
in.
it's this, I
Yeah,
think in that is what I see as a potential shadow in the personal development space. Like if I'm continually rushing to be a better version of myself, I almost by default have to let go of this version or previous versions of myself because they're not good enough, or I have to evolve out of those into the best version of myself. and it does exactly what you're talking about. It breaks off pieces of yourself that you're not willing to integrate.
Completely, and it's got a lot of very suspect underlying schemas or stories, because it's like, Gareth version 45.2, is going to be the best so far, and then we're gonna work on it, and and it's just so linear and so devoid of any kind of connection to the natural cycles of things, which seem to be a good place to go for you know understanding how our souls work. That it's like, well, so does this mean that Gareth version 87.1, yeah, on your deathbed, let's say 99.5, is going to be the pinnacle version? Do we have to wait
Mm.
until then? What does that even mean? You know, um, I have a lot of discomfort and suspicion of the whole kind of personal development world. Um, uh, but there's also a lot of good in it. Obviously, I'm not gonna slate it, but some of those assumptions and some of those patterns, they're like perpetuating some really weird
Thank you
shit.
for bringing that.
Uh,
Yeah, thank you for bringing that, because that's it. I mean, at the basis of it is love and acceptance of ourselves exactly as we are, and the recognition that all of these parts were necessary to help us survive whatever was happening in our world at the time. And I love the analogy of bringing people in, and
mhm.
it's touching on so many things for me, which is like, as within, so without. And I know you actually have a physical bring them in your physical world. You have this like campfire idea that you've actually been practicing in the physical world, right? What is that program about? It seems similar ish.
Well, it it is. It's a hypothetical thing at this stage. Having sat around, numbers of fires with men down the years in men's groups and council and all that kind of thing. I'm interested in, yeah, what is the simplest way of doing that without making it so sacred that it becomes an obstacle to those who don't move in that kind of
Mm.
subculture, or don't have that sense of the world, but isn't so mundane that it doesn't have any juice as well. So what I'm going to do, yeah, what I'm going to do, I'm putting this off, and I keep putting it off. Everything to do with men's work, I keep putting off because I keep waiting until some point where I've got it all figured out. Yeah, it's like, oh, then I'll be useful, and I'm not. I can't do it now because I'm afraid of fucking it up, and what if I get it wrong and I don't know anything, and then men will turn on me, and
And I die.
that kind of fear. But yeah, totally. It'll all be terrible. But every 6 months or so, uh, another friend of a friend who's a young man kills himself, and it just happens again and again. I was out yesterday morning, uh, early, just out the front of the house, and our next door neighbour, lovely, lovely guy, looks after some woods just up on outside the town. He's in his late 70s, early 80s, I think. He was off to a funeral, and I said, sorry to hear that. And it was like, yeah, it's a 37-year-old man, um, uh, who had killed himself recently. And every time that happens, I'm like, stop waiting for perfection. Just do what you got to do. It might be a meager part of something good, but we wait and we wait and we wait. And uh, one of the mantras of my life, I guess, increasingly, I think probably since I had kids, is don't wait, because one of these days, a piano is going to fall out of the sky, or or the disease is going to come, or whatever, and all those things that have been waiting then evaporate like steam or smoke, and it's like, what good was that? So I need to get on with it. What I want to do is this consultation. Basically, I've got a site, mensfire.org, and I need to just put up a page saying, what do you think are the ingredients of goodness with brothers? If you're sitting around a fire, what's what makes for the goodness? So I'm going to do that. Or maybe this conversation will be a bit of a kick up the arse to do that.
I mean, I've got so many things coming through me. First of
Yeah.
all, thank you.
Uh,
Thank you for sharing that. Thank you for sharing the tension that comes from hearing the call and realizing that, we have a story that we can't do it now, because I think that's true for many of us. Um, and
mm,
to get even more practical around it, my analogy for the men's work brand that I'm creating is anchored in a few things, and hopefully some new paradigms of what it means to be a leader and to do business, etc., that are more anchored in collaboration rather than
mm,
competition. So actually what that looks like is some other men's circle brand actually now fills me with excitement that somebody else is doing it, where there's a version of me 15 years ago that saw somebody else
mm.
doing something the same as what I was doing as a direct competitor, like based in scarcity. Like if you get the clients, I don't get the clients. And
Sure, sure. Yeah.
something about that has been a significant
Hmm.
shift. The second theme for me, which is what I want to talk about here, is like I want to expand this work through the digital, because I think it's got the ability to be able to do that. So it can grow really quickly, but I think it needs to be anchored in the physical. And I think that is real men sitting around real fires, one on one. And
Ah,
that's the piece
yeah,
for
yeah.
me. And I've basically built the first half with the digital training program that gets men to this sort of first 6 month milestone. The next is giving them a playbook, which I think, I
Hmm.
love your idea of it being super simple. That's like, if you don't see a men's circle in your community, you're it, bro. You're the one who's fucking holding it. This is how you
That's
hold
it.
it. Maybe something that you and I co-create together, or a call or something, or a simple training program to take
Hmm.
5 men out on a hike, or just go and sit next to the lake, or go and do whatever it is in your particular community that brings men together, with some
Hmm.
backing that gives the brother an opportunity to feel like he's got something that he can use to hold the space if he's never held a space before, while
Hmm.
also, I think, not making it
Yeah.
overly sacred, like you said, so that it can be accessible for the Gareth of 20 years ago. That's what it needs.
Yeah. Totally. I mean, some of my favorite things that I see around are really down to earth adverts at train stations, just kind of, appealing to, not wanting to use too broad brushstrokes, but just ordinary blokes, uh, just going, finding a way to get them to come
Yes.
and talk to each other. That's beautiful to me. But yeah, let's keep talking, um, and emailing, and see what we can come up with, because I agree that just that physical thing is this the physical thing of being in conversation and developing trust with people in proximity. We've all had the experience, I'm sure, of being on Zoom calls, and they can be as profound and beautiful as you like, but then the connection is broken. Call ends, and you're still sitting in your little atomized world, and it's
Hmm.
sometimes that is a brutal shock in itself. Um, but I'm also aware that there are a lot of people doing all sorts of amazing work, and have been down the years, very very similar to this. So I'd love to, yeah, just get loads of voices in to come up with basically, yeah, this kind of downloadable booklet, a package, like you say, of here's the flat
Hmm.
pack version. Yeah, this is not the deluxe VIP, organic
Yes.
culture thing. This is the IKEA or Aldi
It's take it and
kit.
go. Come here, take it,
Yeah,
go, make it your own, find a way to make it
yeah,
work, adapt it as you need to. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Without it needing to be something that is monetized or a brand
Hmm.
or anything, but like you say, has some kind of support possibility behind it, so that it's not people in isolation. But I'm imagining that might have to be a peer support thing, rather than some organization behind it, so to create a horizontal structure of kind of distributed network kind of vibe.
So good.
which is something I'm interested
Bro,
in.
I'm sure we could riff for ages. I would love to make sure that we,
Juicy.
share something that you're working on right now that you're excited about, that people can connect with you on. What's flowing through you creatively at the moment?
What's happening? Mm, uh, I can barely even remember. So I've just got this new book out, The Queen of Heaven, poetry. So I run a small press. Um, uh, we make beautiful books printed on 100% recycled paper, produced by workers' co-ops in the UK. That's feralangels.com. People can find the books there. Um, if people haven't come across my work before, then Sometimes a Wild God is quite a nice poem. It's quite a good way in. You can find that there, or tomhirons.com, or tomhirons.com.
Tom Hirons,
I don't
please.
mind how you pronounce it when you type it, but yeah. But what am I up to at the moment? Um, I'm in the process of turning my press into a workers' co-op. That I'm excited about. I'm writing a book on wildness.
Mm,
Um, I'm trying to approach it in a slightly different way, uh, of getting away from definitions and using a different kind of thinking, looking at polarities again of where we think of wildness and
mm.
unwildness, and then looking at the common ground of the wild ends of each of those polarities. So, you could look at, you know, mm, what could we say? Um, yeah, chaos is wild, order
Right.
is unwild. Yeah, that's a kind of typical kind of statement. Or aliveness is wild, and kind of death is
Mm-hmm.
unwild.
Oh, cool.
Comparing all of these and then kind of overlaying them to come up with some territory. I'm really enjoying working on that. Working with an American storyteller called Helen Cowart, on a book on the ethics of
Ah,
storytelling.
cool.
Who gets to tell which stories, and who gets to decide who tells which stories and what's that about.
Wow, dude.
And that's very, very exciting. And my next collection of poetry, which I'm working on now, which is half of it is poems in response to the ongoing genocide in Gaza, and generally poems about war, conflict, in the outer world and in the inner world. So they're pretty strong. Um, and then there's this quarterly poetry magazine, print magazine called Clarion, which I need to get my arse in gear to get the second issue of that out. So there's a fair bit going on. Yeah,
Beautiful. I don't want to go before I ask you this
but
question
it's
as well. Oh,
summer.
summer. So you're spending time outside?
Summer, trying to get out onto the moor with my boys and my partner, Rosie, as much as I can, getting them in the river, right up on the moor, and seeing them just blossom into their the
How
selves
old are
that
they?
they are when they're in 9 and 5. Yeah. um, and just how different they are, when they're in the house and we're doing that whole kind of domestic world, and then you take them out and get them on the moor, and suddenly it's like all the squabbling and the kind of middle world small selves that they're in just seem to fade away, and suddenly they are just in beauty, and that's how I plan to spend as much of this summer as I can. Yeah.
That's I
What
was
were you
going to
going to
say a
say?
few things. One of them is that that wilderness coaching has been so valuable for me. Like I offer services that for I live in a pretty like transient community where people come to do spiritual work and stuff. And so yeah, having people that don't have access
Uh,
to wild spaces, you sort of don't have to do anything except just get outside. Just give them the opportunity just to be reconnected to nature and just slow the nervous system down. And so yeah, hearing you say that about your voice feels beautiful, because yeah, I think that's how we're supposed to be
mhm.
living.
Yeah, and yet, that isn't the circumstances that most people are living in, and that for me, I now take people out and run wilderness
Oh
fasts.
yes.
So we've got one coming up next year, in Devon, There's this constant question for me of, it's an incredibly privileged situation to be able to, take the time and then have the access to reasonably undesecrated land to have, that kind of experience on. How can we work skillfully in situations where there's not a fucking chance that anyone is going to get
Mm-hmm.
out of the city? It's like accepting that is, we can talk about how we'd like things to be or how we feel things should be as, these human animals, cosmic animals that we are, but yet, how are we going to work with those millions and millions and millions and millions of people in the cities? How does nature connection work under those circumstances? Maybe, I guess it just looks like one dandelion pushing up through the crack in the pavement and revering that for a year, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, for me it comes down to, like, the physical the physical
It's a big
constraints of,
question.
what is mine to do, because we're not disconnected from all of that pain. And so at some level I find solace in trusting life, that at some level we're just flowing at the level that we have access to at a collective consciousness, and this is currently what it looks like. And that may feel terrible, and on a
Mm,
bigger time scale, death is part of the inherent cycle of life and nature. And so, yeah, when I really just tap into that and look at a bigger timeline, the one thing I am clear about when I see what's happening in the nature around where I live, if there were no human beings here, nature would be just fucking fine. Like, give it 10 years, this place is back to normal, all the water's fine,
mhm,
animals
mhm.
return. Like, that's, I have no concern that nature's going to continue. And so, at some level, it's really just being disconnected from the idea that we're so fucking important in this big play that we need to worry ourselves with it, and just, yeah, live with an open heart and do the pieces that we can that feel meaningful. Tell a meaningful story about it, because that's all we're doing anyway. I mean, it's no more meaningful to be in service of
Mhm.
men than it is to be plumbing my house. Like, just find every single moment to be, yeah, a gift.
Well, well, yeah. I mean, for me, I mean, this question, kind of having being someone who's interested in the world and, interested in what it means to be alive, you ask the question, what can I
Hmm.
do, every so often, don't you?
Yes.
So various points in your journey round the wheel. It's like, what should I be doing? Should I become an activist about this and that? Should I put my body there and use my skills here, or would I be more useful in service of that? And you kind of try and do the calculations of where would the best application be for maximum effect. And what I've come to, and what I come back to again and again and again, is coming back to that conversation about the soul kernel and that seed image. Is like, if you are doing
Mm.
that, if you know who you are, then things flow from that. So, I constantly question what I'm doing, and then I come back to
Beautiful.
this through this cycle upon cycle of rumination. I'm like, yeah, just know who you are and get on with it. The trouble is, most of us, and this sounds like a really grandiose statement, but I'll pretty much die on this hill. Most of us don't have a fucking clue who we are, and we're thrashing around like orphans in, just wandering about, trying to find some sense, trying to find some identity to cling on to, some story, some sense of purpose. And, that's why I believe in the wilderness fast, because it was the thing that, after years and years of thrashing around, going this or this or this or this, was like, boom, this here, take this, nourish it,
Mm.
work with it. That is your job. And then do it in the world. And it has a different quality to it. So that's why I run the wilderness fasts. There's also this camp in, I think it's end of September, beginning of October, that Rosie, my partner, and I, she's also a poet and facilitator, um, and a fearsome play fighter as well. We're running a camp called Warrior Poet Rebel Assembly in Shropshire in the UK, to basically explore what can we do, with this image of the warrior poet. How can we galvanize one another and kind of bring to our language and our eloquence more to bear, or to bear more effectively in the worlds in which we wish to engage. So I'm really looking forward to that. Um, People can find out about that on my
I'll
website
definitely
as
put your
well.
link to your website in the show notes. I'd like to invite you to another co-creation, which is something. When I saw Warrior Poet on your website, I was like, wow. More recently, hitting some of the archetypes and checking some of these embodiments of the healthy masculine archetypes seems to be inherent in the journey of healing masculinity. But the warrior archetype came up, and we found this really amazing um, experience that we created, which came from what looked like one of life's like kicks in the ass, where I was promoting to get some engagement in a launch that we were doing, and we had 84 men say yes to a free men's circle that we were holding, and we ran some Facebook ads. And the nature of these things is you don't always get everybody showing up, but if we got half of them or 40% of them, we would have
Sure.
been happy with like 40 people showing up. Of the 84 that showed up, we got zero, none. And so I was like, fuck, what happened there? What is it? The point was,
Mm,
we then went into a bit of a like a post game to see what that was, and we were like, maybe men don't want to come and be vulnerable, because this was like it was sort of cold traffic for us, so they don't want to talk about it. Maybe they don't want to do another
mm-hmm,
Zoom
mm-hmm,
thing. Maybe it was too long because it was a 2 hour circle. And what we came up with was an idea of
mm-hmm,
saying, what
mm-hmm,
if we made it a fun, unique experience where it was certain that the man didn't have to say anything. So we came up with this idea of the warrior walk, which is still
mm-hmm,
a Zoom call, but you put headphones on. I played some backtracks and then did sort of a 30-minute guided walking meditation for, at one stage, 25 men walking around their own individual green spaces
mm-hmm,
or their own individual worlds, all in a frequency, because we were connected through the tech, while guiding a meditation. And I wonder if there isn't a space for us to do something like that, where you share some of your poetry and an embodied experience with the themes that you and your partner are playing with it, that to the same audience, because it was so fun to do. And yeah, they loved it. So I just want to put that out there.
mm-hmm. Uh-huh. Yeah, yeah. Let's think on it, and talk more. Um, yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? All the different ways that we can use this strange situation of having these possibilities. I have in me there is a total Luddite and also a total geek. Uh, these polarities of relationship with technology, but it is an extraordinary thing, and the possibilities of, yeah, like you say, casting a wider net and doing some good sounds like a good thing to
I'll
me.
bring it when I let it land. But I think there's something in,
Yeah,
giving access to men having a story while staying connected in a way that for us was super meaningful. It was really, really good. We ran three of them, and the first one, just to
yeah,
give you
yeah,
an example, we had 25 people confirm and 17 showed up. So something was different compared to 84 and zero. Percentage wise,
aha,
we realized we landed
yeah, yeah,
something that was different to, and that was the blessing in that seemingly failed launch that we had. Was like this life was pushing us in another direction, which when I did it, I was like, oh, this is so easy. I get to DJ and guide meditation, which I love to do
yeah,
anyway. And and we had great success with it. So it felt like one of those gifts that we received.
wonderful, wonderful. Okay,
Okay,
let's
before I
explore it
let you go, I
more.
want to ask you
I'm sure
something
we can
else
do something.
around
Uh,
relationship. You mentioned that you're in
oh,
partnership.
yeah,
You also mentioned the word polyamory at some point in this
yeah,
conversation. And I'd love to get your reflection on
hmm,
what your
yeah, yeah.
current view of relationship is and what your relationship journey has been, specifically with your romantic partners, if that's something you want to drop into.
How long you got, man? Um, that might have to be another conversation. I didn't even tell you about the boy and the peregrine falcon. So maybe we should have another conversation. We talk about the peregrine falcon
Relationships.
and
Okay, let's do that.
relationships. Um, yeah, and so yeah, but in brief, the what's worth saying in brief
I'd like to get
about
your
that.
sense around
Um,
the journey of conscious non-monogamy as a theme. Was that always alive for you, or did it come into your life at a
mhm,
later stage? And the reason I'm asking that question is it's not a very common conversation for the world that I came from. The idea that you could be openly and honestly connecting with
sure.
others, however I saw non-monogamy done unconsciously, pretty commonplace. Everyone cheating with everybody else. So yeah, just keen to hear if you have anything around that particular theme or
Hmm.
style of relating.
It's been a long, long, long journey, as it has been for most of us, trying to figure out uh, how how to do relationship um, in a way which actually works. It's way too big to go into mm, in this
Mm.
time, I think. But I have um, it's a huge piece in my own journey, which is why I don't want to
Okay.
just kind of skate over it or just kind of offer a meager sandwich when I think there's actually quite a
Mm.
feast there. But yeah, I've moved through various phases in particularly in the last 5 years, but also over the last 15, 20 years, with different approaches to relationship and different experiments and different agreements, different models for myself and my partner or partners about what we were doing and uh, what was right or allowable or desirable and all that kind of stuff. Um, currently I'm in an absolutely committed relationship, which we have, mutually, for the time being, kind of closed to a one-to-one, but not necessarily with a sense of that being a permanent thing, but for the sake of nourishing our nervous systems, which, as I'm sure you'll know, if you are doing non-monogamy in any kind of honest way, and trying to do it whilst maintaining good relations, um, is pretty monumentally intense work. There's no shadow work like it as far as I've
Mhm.
encountered,
Yeah.
really. Um, and and it's hard on the nervous system. And if you're coming into situations of consensual non-monogamy with a battered nervous system, as most of us are, then the work of being in relationship has to also be the work of restoring some kind of nervous system health. And I think that's true if you're in a monogamous relationship anyway, but you can kind of get away with just being a complete mess in a monogamous relationship, whereas in a consensual non-monogamous relationship, you just have to up your game of, you know, knowing what your capacities and your needs and wants are, and staying honest, noticing things as they occur, and your communication skills and all of those kind of things. It's like, fuck, this is yeah, advanced level stuff to try and do well. And if your nervous system is ragged, you're not going to do it well, or there's the possibility of not doing it well and just ending up getting even more battered than you were to begin with, which doesn't help anyone. So there's, like everything I'm talking about, there's this kind of bellows of kind of in and out and kind of phases of expansion, phases of contraction. And it's been a relief in many ways for the last 4 months or so, five or 6 months, to go, actually no, let's close this down and just concentrate on the out breath. There's a lot to talk about
Thank you
there.
for that. Yeah, I realized the
I'd
depth
love,
of
yeah,
relationship.
I'd love to have that conversation.
Yeah, beautiful. I'll give you the cliff notes for me as well. Where, yeah, I'm also in a space of conscious monogamy with my partner for the same reasons. We're on almost 6 years of in being
Mm,
in this space, and like you, don't have an idea that it has to open or that it has to stay closed, but that we will be with what's true moment to moment. And so, yeah, we've been monogamous since we connected 6 years ago for the same reason. We want to build something solid. We want to build our relationship and really from a real place of solid foundation. Seems like the only place that conscious non-monogamy would stand a chance, because yeah, I think outside of that it's going to, yeah, unless it was like a couple of lovers that I didn't go too deep with, which I've had in the past, but like having a really strong, solid primary partnership, yeah, requires a level of, as you said, finessing, self introspection, expecting that it's going to potentially be challenging, and yeah, having the tools to be able to be messy, realize you're going to be triggered, realize it's going to hit every single one of your wounds, all your shadows will come up. Yeah. And fucking good luck, mate.
Yay!
Go with that.
Yay! Yeah, totally, totally. And talking about, stories and the power of stories. If you come from a powerful Christian story being central to your upbringing and your notions of what relationship is meant to be and all of that kind of stuff, de-storying that kind of stuff. I don't know how people do it. I count myself fortunate that I didn't have that. I kind of grew up um, without without any strong Christian story apart from what we got in school, which wasn't much. Uh, and I look at people who are still grappling with, trying to inhabit Christianity or kind of be in relation to their Christian story, and I'm like, wow, that's what a thing to carry. That's a heavy inheritance.
And even without religion, our collective culture has a story of monogamy. Like all our fairy tales, all of our movies, there's no one open relating there, doing fucking cozy three-way connections, nothing of that. It's like all, it was taboo. In fact, there's a show called Taboo in the UK where they spoke about non-monogamy as this like big thing, and they made it a taboo. But I know what you mean. It's like underpinned by these central core beliefs that we all have about what relationships should look like. And the idea that anything could be outside of that hits those core beliefs in a way that makes me and some people not feel safe. Like the first time I heard about it, I noticed a part of me completely check out. Like I was like, not a fuck, how does that even work? And I also
Yeah,
held a place, as I said before, of watching myself be both the cheater and the cheated with in my old life and old relationships in, non-conscious non-monogamy, cheating on people, and just what a mess that was.
hmm
Yet somehow that was the story that seemed to be okay in that phase. But being open and honest about it seems, yeah, weird. We've never seen it modeled before. I haven't seen it modeled before.
no, no, and yet, was coming right back to that thing of the ancestral medicine. We think how long humans have been around and how recent this way of doing things
Hmm.
is. It's just a thin veneer
Yes.
on top of the great story. What's 10,000 years
Hmm.
between friends?
Exactly. Yeah. We would have been in the same tribe, making love to the same woman, sharing partners, raising kids together. Like that wouldn't have looked too unrealistic a few hundred years ago. Who knows?
Maybe,
I
I don't
wasn't
know.
there.
Um,
Brother, thank you. This has been epic. I really appreciate you taking the
oh,
time to do this, and
thank you, Gareth.
thank you for sharing your magic with the world and for staying true to that kernel. First of all, for finding it and for tuning into that every single day. I think that's probably one of the gems from this episode for me, among others, of just returning to that inner peace that we've been given to bring to the world. Like to our responsibilities to find that and to bring that. So yeah, I really appreciate that, brother. Thank you.
Mm, hey, bless you, Gareth. It's been a joy. It's been really lovely being on here, and I look forward to further conversation and seeing what
Beautiful, man.
unfolds.
Thanks again for taking the
Keep
time.
doing
And
the
yeah,
good
it was
work.
great to get to know one another
Yeah,
here. And I just had a sense that this was going to be epic, and it was. Thank you.
yeah, wonderful.
Till next time, brother. Thank you.
Hey, go well, man. Lots of love.